All right, now we became official. Uh, okay, so far we have four presenters. We stay with 15 minutes and then we have time to discuss it. Mark, you the first one. Could you start? Could you upload your presentation?
I don't have any PowerPoints, just have an oral
It's all
presentation.
yours. You can
And
start.
thank you very much to Professor Ploberger
Okay.
and to all of my colleagues here today. Now, I did talk, my original topic was prospects for Turkish-US relations in the Trump administration. But I think in light of the recent developments in the war with Israel and Iran, that changes really everything. And I am welcome, particularly to Aslı Hanım, any thoughts on what I say and whether you have reactions to my colleagues in terms of what the implications of this development is, because this is quite a earth-shaking development. So I'm going to kind of like run through along the abstract that I prepared, but at the same time hit the maybe the more recent issues. I've been covering and following this issue for many, many years, and it really has gone through many iterations. But this one is really a shock to the system. And what does it mean? Overall, I think we have a new trajectory in the obviously in the Middle East with the at least putative decline of Iran. What does that mean for Turkey? And of course, observers are looking at this, and I think we all believe that there's an opportunity for the ascent for Turkey and Turkey. But Turkey's position in the region is, if you notice, Turkey took a very stood back a bit from becoming involved in this conflict in terms of its comments, in terms of its interactions. So I think my feeling about it was that Turkey was adopting, even when the war started between Israel, Iran, and then the American bombing of the three facilities, took a wait and see approach to see what would engender, what would be the result of the war. And the truth of the matter is, we're not really sure what the result of the war is. We really don't know the extent of the attacks, how long this has delayed the Iranian nuclear program, what is the implication for the leadership in Iran, many questions about the region, about we just it's really in a state of flux and great confusion. And even domestically, a tremendous debate has occurred with respect to the question of whether Trump was authorized under the War Powers Act, which I believe he is absolutely authorized to have undertaken these hostilities. I'm happy to comment on it. I think it's very clear that the War Powers Act has never limited any president of the United States. No president has ever agreed to be subject to the War Powers Act, and accordingly, I believe it is constitutional. But in any event, they kind of moved from the War Powers Act to dealing with the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, which the president is signing today, which happens to be American Independence Day. And so this is a very, very pivotal date for the United States. So starting with Turkish-US relations. Turkish-US relations, interestingly, are really improving tremendously. And at least on the presidential level, President Trump is very complimentary of President Erdogan, has invited him to Washington. I think that the main trajectory of the Turks is to be able to remove the sanctions that were placed at the end of the first Trump administration and to facilitate the acquisition of F-16s and F-16 parts, and also the ability of Turkey to renew its position in the F-35 program. From, in effect, it was ejected. I mean, Turkey paid for its participation in the program, but when it took the S-400s from Russia, it then, there was the National Defense Authorization Act, and the Congress mandated that the president must impose sanctions on Turkey. Those sanctions that were imposed were probably I would say, on the menu of sanctions, really the least level of sanctions. Nevertheless, they are in place. So that dialogue and that movement is going along. And that sort of segues into Syria, where Turkey has really been a very pivotal player. And Syria plays a big role in Turkey's policy in the sense that the more than 3 million refugees in Turkey, Syrian refugees, Turkey wants to return those to Syria, wants to stabilize the Syrian regime. And al-Shara, amazingly, has been able to facilitate the removal of sanctions by the United States on Syria. And, I think that is rather other remarkable things. We saw Trump meeting with al-Shara. We know that the developments that have occurred in Syria are no less than remarkable in the sense that you have 25 or 30,000 jihadis coming and taking over the Assad regime, which, by the way, I think was facilitated and made possible by Israel, because Israel took out Hezbollah, Israel took out Iran's defenses, and Israel and Russia, which has bases in Syria, was distracted with Ukraine. So by an interesting confluence of events, the 25 to 30,000 HTS jihadis were able to take power. Now, the question in Syria presents itself because you have the Syrian Kurds, or YPG, and the PYD, which Turkey takes the position that this is allied with the PKK. The United States does not have the YPG and the PYD on its terror list, and as a fact, in fact, the CENTCOM, American CENTCOM, fights with the Syrian Kurds against ISIS and so forth. So a very tricky situation. How to stabilize the regime in Syria. And we even see some, another incredible developments where al-Shara is the possibility of, people say, I don't know if it's correct, that Syria might join the Abraham Accords, Syria might form some sort of relationship with Israel. These are things that were been inconceivable if we had this conversation weeks or months ago. Nobody would have said that such a discussion would be possible. So the question is, what happens with HTS, with al-Shara? What happens with its relationship with Turkey, with Qatar, with Saudi Arabia? The purpose, stabilizing the regime. And I think that al-Shara has presented himself as a very, again, we don't know what he is. Americans are very perplexed by him. He looks good. He dresses nicely. In fact, I'm going to try to dress like him with a nice turtleneck and a jacket, and a nicely trimmed beard. He's a terrific looking guy. And he's a real fashion statement. He should, walk the red carpet. But the point is that, and the Turks have helped tremendously in facilitating and helping with that image. But for real, what is his view? And really the problem is the foreign fighters in Syria. We could do a separate thing on Syria, and obviously the massacres of Druzes and Christians and obviously Alawites is not acceptable, and the United States will not help al-Shara stabilize the regime if that continues. So that's a fraught situation. I would say the Kurds, just a word on the Kurds, they talk about the peace process in Turkey, which is with Öcalan putting down the PKK arms. This is all quite amazing. And what's most amazing about it, and here's the thing, again, amazing list of amazing things, is that it was Bahçeli of the MHP, the most nationalist party, who came up with the suggestion and said, I met with Öcalan and he's going to do this, and the PKK. But again, inconceivable things. So I think that the whole, again, the region is in tremendous flux and confusion. Right now we have a ceasefire. We don't know how that's going to develop. I think Prime Minister Netanyahu is coming to meet with Trump. And that takes me to I think almost the last point. I see about a couple of minutes more is to talk about President Trump. Because if you want to understand American foreign policy today, I think it's President Trump. If you want to understand the direction of American policy, Donald Trump. You have Marco Rubio as the national security advisor and the Secretary of State. That's what he's also the head of I think he's the head also of the archives. I mean, he has about 10 jobs, which used to be all held by different people. But that's President Trump. And we know that, and I would say, and if I could sum up President Trump like this, I don't know how many. I went on one roller coaster with my father when I was a little boy, and I didn't like it, and it was scary. Okay. But to be with American, you get on the roller coaster, you put on the seatbelt, and you go for the ride. And it goes up and down and up and down, and you never know where it's going to go. Who knows tomorrow? Maybe there'll be a peace agreement on Gaza. Who knows tomorrow? Whether there could be an end of the Ukraine war. We don't know. We don't know. But again, I do think, and again, I certainly don't speak for all Americans because we are very, very polarized. But as far as shaking up the structure, shaking things up, Trump has taken many of our predetermined, pre-existing ideas and broken them in pieces, almost like Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall. We couldn't put it together. We just break up the piece of pottery, right? And it's just figuring out where we're going. I mean, you would never have predicted that, all the things that he's done with the border, all the things that he's done in the Middle East, all the things that he's done are just game changers one after the other. I mean, the Democrats are not in favor. And I want to say this other thing about Turkey-US relations, and that's also important. If you notice, there's complete polarization in the Congress, right? The big, beautiful bill, all the Democrats voted against it and 2 Republicans. It just passed the House. All the Republicans less 2. It passed the Senate. Admittedly, it was a tie, and the vice president broke the tie. On Turkey, there is significant antipathy in Congress for Turkey because we do have very significant lobbies that lobby against Turkey, and that's our system. Our system operates with constituents and lobbies and interest groups and election cycles that are very, very short. So basically, Congress is very, very important, especially with these sanctions and all these other things, so that you have to look at U.S. politics as very, very trifurcated. I don't know if that's the right word, if there's such a word. We have a Congress, we have a presidency, and a judiciary. And in my conclusion, I would say that American politics, the judiciary has had an incredible influence on this balance of power, this separation of powers, this checks and balances. So to understand, and again, to really conclude, Tip O'Neill, our Speaker of the House, said all politics is local. And that's true in Turkey. It's true in America. It's true everywhere. And that's the dynamic that is going to fuel the future relations between the United States and Turkey, the issue of Iran and Israel, relations with Europe, and on, will be fueled very much by the domestic politics and this domestic movement. And in the last words, President Trump. And thank you. I think 15 minutes on my clock. I believe I honored what you had, Dr. Ploberger. Thank you very much.
You're exactly on the 15 minutes. Thank you. We will discuss it later because you introduced a lot of issues. We can discuss it. Okay. Thank you. Second presenter, Oksana. It's your time.
Can I share my presentation?
Of course you can. You're very welcome. Just do it. 15 minutes. It's yours.
Can you see it?
Partly, please click down. Yeah, now it's better. Now it's fine. Okay.
So thank you very much for this possibility. And actually, this paper is part of my book project, and part of the presentation will speak about my book project as well, which is devoted to the historical exploration of the northwestern Russian borders, and not only northwestern, but so my main idea is that the uniqueness of the Russian borders in the 20th and 21st centuries was that they formed a part of a highly ideological and highly contested project, first of communism and then of the so-called Russian World Project, which positioned itself as distinct, but in fact had very much in common with the previous one. And the perception of the project as highly contested from the outside as well as from the inside resulted in the fact that the borders and border controls function not in the traditional functional sense of controlling and alleviating the transborder flows of people and commodities, but as tools of the existential struggle for the regime survival. And recently, the so-called hybrid operations, which have been a reality in fact, from the beginning of the 20th century, yet again came to the fore of the Russian border policy. In the history of borders, the Soviet case and then the Russian one was post-Soviet one, was unique, not so much because of its lock and key ideal, but because of its transformative agenda, and that's what I'm studying here. There were other factors of its uniqueness. For example, a combination of ethnophilia and paranoia in regards to non-Russian population, migrants and ethnic minorities in the borderland, how Terry Martin had put it, resulted in peculiar human resources management in border areas and for state defense protection. The Soviet and post-Soviet attitude towards transborder illegal flows, such as smuggling, illegal migration, made a radical break from the Russian Empire, where the authorities were mainly concerned about the spread of subversive ideas, like when illegal movements and revolutionary groups challenged imperial authorities and used transborder flows for that purpose, but they were not using it themselves. And the Soviet and then post-Soviet states actively manipulated these informal networks to expand their political influence, exert pressure in contested borderlands, or to subvert the neighboring states. And here the historiography, like the historiography of major historical trends in which I was trying to look for inspiration for my project. And now we are going to the sources which I'm using while trying to compare two cases, one case of the 1920s and then another case of like 100 years later. And here are some things from the later period. I was analyzing how the Russian state was how the official policy of the Russian state towards the migrants coincided with the illicit uses of the migrants' flows in and out of the country. And here are some statistics which I found, and I'll also how the trends of the migrant Russian state's attitude towards migrants influenced the current situation. And now I'm going to my two cases. The first one was the transborder hybrid operations of the Soviet political police in the 1920s. I look how they used this first migration crisis and how they transformed the social identities of those whom they involved. They were like the borderlanders tried to use the border for their own means, for the economic survival, and the Russians and the Soviet state was using them for their own political purposes, and the processes of social transformation occurred. There were various networks forms. The Czechies were transforming into smugglers, the peasants were transforming into Czechies, and the customs officials were transforming into criminals. And all this happened in the peculiar context. And the second case is the hybrid warfare cases of the 1920s. There were three cases. And I'm also using how I'm looking at how the interpretations in mass media and historiography of this influence of this instance is changed with time. While initially, after the first migration crisis at the Russian northwestern border in 2015, 2016, there were many works that insisted that the Russian state did not interfere directly, and it was like factors like the Russian bureaucratic ineptitude or apathy, incompetence of the border guards that contributed to this crisis when thousands of the refugees from different countries streamed through Russian northwestern borders to seek a political asylum in Norway and Finland. And later, with two other incidents of the Arctic route, in the Belarusian case and the later Russian case, when yet again the temperatures in 2022 went back minus 22 degrees zero. Again, thousands of smugglers in bicycles went through the border to seek asylum. But within the changing geopolitical context of the Russian war in Ukraine, the interpretations radically changed, and everyone claimed that this was the actually hybrid warfare on the part of the Russian state directed at Norway and Finland for various reasons for accession to NATO and so on. And yet again, I'm looking at the socially transforming nature that, for example, how the accounts interpret how the Russian state manipulated the second occurrence, that it was through global social networks actually offering the migrants and the intermediaries the new possibilities of going to the EU to seek a political asylum. And I'm using the social accounts to trace the transformatory effects of these double standards. And the double standards is that on the one hand, the Russian state ostensibly actually wages the warfare on the migrants, even looking at them as disrupting the Russian state, disrupting its functioning, but on the other hand, it's actively using them in illicit transborder operations. And down to my conclusion, I would say that the controlled migration as a geopolitical tool was not only present, but central to Soviet domestic and foreign policy, and in a different form also in contemporary Russia. Despite alarmist claims about recent changes in the Russian way of waging war and exploiting its borders, including the so-called Gerasimov doctrine, all current practices seem to be a mirror image of all Soviet approaches, and we need to shift the time frame because the majority of scholars who claim that the current Russian operations are a new wine in an old bottle. They almost never go beyond the Cold War period. And in the 1920s, we can find a lot of inspiration. For example, as Vladimir Lenin stated in August 1920, we should take military measures, try to punish Latvia and Estland immediately. For example, on the shoulders of Balakovich, it's an sergeant, to cross the border and hang around 100 of the bureaucrats and riches. And so I also wanted to say that, yet again, I'll repeat that the peculiarity of Russian transborder uses of migrations and history arise from its peculiar transformative impacts. And the direct part consisted of the Soviet and Russian ideological agenda of turning the borderland residents as well as migrants into the politically loyal, homogenized social mass, but the indirect part of the border project actively recruited clandestine accomplices from the ranks of smugglers, state servants, border controllers, entrepreneurs, migrants, and refugees for destabilizing the neighboring countries. And the consequences of social transformations caused by transborder impacts usually transpired during the periods of political turbulence and international instability, and manifested themselves in the form of deep, long-term shadow alliances, corruption license, and interagency hostilities. And that's what I'm also studying, the interagency hostilities between the Soviet Chekists, Russian political security services, and the customs apparatus, and between the smugglers, entrepreneurs. They all made the Russian border encounters unique. In words of Rudyard Kipling, describing a frontal encounter between the son of a colonel and the border thief. But there is neither east to west, border nor breed, nor birth, when two strong men stand face to face, though they come from the ends of the earth. And for me, this citation is very important because it's like it portrays this border space, which becomes an array of long-term unintended consequences. The Russian border converted the smugglers into the counterintelligence agents and vice versa. And everything is absolutely unpredictable, but we should go further into that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very well in time as well. As I said, discussion later on. Let's move to the next presenter. This is Aslı. Are you ready?
Yes, I also have an oral presentation. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation.
Yes, please.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm starting. My paper is about Turkey's arguing its EU membership bid through a civilizational discourse. So it's essentially about trying to know about the civilizationism, Turkey's civilizationism with respect to the EU. And it's about trying to reason the way Turkey does, departing from the question, why does Turkey still needs to pursue a civilizational discourse, although the Alliance of Civilizations initiative has faded. So I try to answer to this question by saying that because the Alliance of Civilizations discourse for Turkey is a functional discourse, and also Turkey's civilizationalism operates on the level of the critics of the Eurocentrism, and in this dimension also, which is about Turkey's criticizing the European Union from the aspect of Eurocentrism, Turkey leads the civilizationism. So that civilizationism continues. If we have to start from the Alliance of Civilizations project or initiative in 2005, Turkey with Spain were the leading countries of this initiative under the auspices of the UN. However, Turkey's position in that initiative was to represent the Eastern world. So I also advocate that in all this, Turkey emphasizes its Muslim Eastern identity instead of its Western identity. Maybe we may discuss if Turkey has a Western identity, but for a long time, Turkey's discourse was about defending how Western it was. Now Turkey emphasizes that it belongs to the Muslim Eastern world. So not only I say that Turkey's discourse with regard to the EU is based on a civilizationism, I also say that this civilizationism is about Turkey's positioning itself in the Muslim Eastern world. So the alliance of civilizations has faded, as you know, but since 2018, Turkey tries to revive this initiative. However, it is still on the table, even if it has faded. So we can say that this is so because for Turkey, especially in regard of defending Turkey's EU membership bid, the necessity for the EU to access to the Union, Alliance of Civilizations is a very functional discourse. In this sense, Turkey proposes itself as a remedy, as an antidote to global conflict, because Turkey's membership to the EU will prevent the conflict of civilizations, especially between the Christian and the Muslim, Christian West and the Muslim East. So Turkey's membership to the EU will be a turning point for the whole Western civilization and the Islamic world. This argument is in fact a justification of the importance that this country attributes to itself, but not only it is about the importance the country attributes to itself, it's also about acquiring a global prestige in the eyes of the Islamic world. So Turkey's membership, possible membership, will provide this country with a global prestige in the eyes of the Islamic world. Turkey does underline this issue at every platform up until 2007. But this discourse of Alliance of Civilizations also reinforced the Justice and Development Party's positioning on the domestic scene as well, because Turkey's role in the Alliance of Civilizations initiative is interpreted by the Turkish public as the increased power of the country in the international arena, thanks to the Justice and Development Party government. On the other hand, this discourse, Alliance of Civilizations, is functional because it emphasizes a fundamental identity difference between the Western and the Islamic worlds. Already, Turkey, as you know, assumed the leadership of the Islamic world in the Alliance of Civilizations initiative. And so this civilizational difference also served to cover up the limping reform process behind the declining relations after 2005 and justify disruption. So in fact, what we saw was every problem with the European Union was reflected as if it was a problem of civilizational language. Although it was a problem of democracy record, maybe economical record, but these aspects were downplayed. To summarize, I'm not finishing. I only came to the half of it. But to summarize the Alliance of Civilizations, this discourse has been functionalized in order to laud the Justice and Development Party's embrace of the Islamic identity, a global prestige in domestic and foreign policy, to play the leadership of the Islamic world as an output of identity, and therefore to legitimize the central role Turkey looks for in foreign policy. it also served in line with the perspective of Turkey's EU accession, of which the biggest obstacle noticed was civilizational difference. Lastly, this rhetoric of alliance of civilizations helped to preserve status quo during the periods of decline in relations. And in all of this, Justice and Development Party disposes Turkey's identity that it positions in the Muslim Eastern world as a functional subject. However, now I want to talk more about the critical aspect of Turkey's civilizationism with the EU. However, for over 2 decades now, Turkey's civilizationism with the EU has also employed the foundational role of Eurocentrism in unjust global structures as central to the country's relationship with the EU. Precisely claiming to be unjustly treated by the EU, Turkey associates this situation to the marginalization of the Muslim world in the global context by a Eurocentrism. Turkish authorities thus emphasize on Turkey's Muslim Eastern identity because this difference-based civilizationism informs the country's critical self-assertive relationship with the EU. This is my thesis. In so doing, Turkey also refers to Ottoman Islamic justice because for Turkey, the Eurocentrism and global injustice are 2 aspects of the same phenomenon. So the Ottoman Islamic justice is a point of reference for Turkey claiming to be unjustly treated by the EU. So I quote from President Erdogan, who says that if there is even the smallest negativity today about the Ottomans, who ruled over a vast territory for 6,000 years, we will blush and bow our heads down. This is because the state is ruled for justice. The sufferings, cruelties, massacres, and crimes against humanity in the lands where the Ottomans retreated are always the result of injustice. Here, we can see nearly an affirmation of civilizational exceptionalism by Turkey, and Pax Ottomana, in this sense, serves as a reference point for the Ottoman Islamic justice. Pax Ottomana indicates the harmony of nations subject to the Ottoman order, although this must be nuanced, but by implication, it is as if justice in the broadest sense of the word is conceived as a political and ethical value embedded in Turkey's deep tradition. We all know about the discourse of President Erdogan, who says that the world is bigger than 5. The world is bigger than 5 and a fairer world is possible is not just a reform, is not just a call to reform the United Nations Security Council. For Turkey, this is a call for global justice. On the other hand, Turkey's criticism of the global order is also addressed to the EU. And for Turkey, it is difficult not to see the EU as separate from the Eurocentric concept. and in Turkish terms, the Eurocentric concept as defined by injustice, particularly regarding how the EU handles Turkey's case. So once again, referring to the unjust composition of the UN Security Council, Turkey shifts its criticism of Eurocentrism at the global level back to the European, after underlining that the EU will not accept Turkey because of its Muslim character. It is then stated, unfortunately, the EU does not benefit Europe at the moment. We have a thesis right now. We say the world is bigger than 5. Now the European Union has not once been able to catch this. For one thing, Europe is especially bigger than the European Union. In fact, in all this, Ankara frames Turkey's possible membership to the EU within the imperative to build the EU as a cosmopolitan, democratic, and normative power. This is Ankara's discourse. Because this discourse is also closely related to Turkey's provisions to rebuild the current international order. The ideal construction of the EU identity for Turkey is the same that it foresees for the restoration of the global order. Murat Yeşiltaş, an important academic person, in this sense states that the reconstructed international order for Turkey would be politically multipolar, economically multi-centered, and in the context of civilization, multicultural and pluralistic. So Turkey's difference-based civilizational discourse with regard to the EU represents a much larger questioning of the unjust structure of the international relations from Turkey's point of view. So we can say that Turkish civilizationalism regarding the EU not only informs the objective of advancing Turkey's EU accession prospect, but also proclaims Turkey as a critical self-assertive force vis-à-vis the Union. In conclusion, within its civilizational discourse, Turkish civilizationalism with the EU operates both functionally within its alliance of civilizations discourse, that is, in relation to the contribution of Turkey's difference-based civilizational identity to the construction of the EU identity. This is functional aspect. And Turkish civilizationism operates critically within its stance against Eurocentrism with regard to the EU's inability to absorb this civilizational difference. So it is indeed interesting to see that in both cases, in fact, Turkey demands the recognition of its identity difference. Briefly, the AKP, the Justice and Development Party's civilizational rhetoric with the EU has been ongoing. It's because it provides Turkey with both functional and critical arguments. On the other hand, the common content in all these arises from Turkey's conception of a just, egalitarian and pluralistic EU projection, which is in fact a prerequisite for the recognition of its identity difference. One sentence. Yes? I just have one sentence to say.
Here, Asli, you already spoke 18 minutes. Please come to the end.
Okay. So, in fact, last sentence, Turkey's civilizationalism with the EU seems to continue instead of the notion of Europe of norms and values. This is my last sentence.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We will have time to discuss later on, but as I said, 50 minutes to start with. You already had 18 minutes or almost 20 minutes. So, next presenter. Next online is Harun. Are you ready?
Yes, I am ready.
Okay,
Mr.
it's all
Chairman.
yours.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you for having me today. And I will speak about Serbian foreign policy toward Bosnia and Herzegovina. I will just say something about historical background, and then I will just show you some examples how Serbian politicians support separatism in Bosnia and Herzegovina. After the horrific war of the 1990s, Bosnia and Herzegovina began developing diplomatic relations with its neighbors. Bosnian leaders understood that good relations with neighboring countries were a key precondition for joining the European Union. In this context, in 1996, Bosnian President Alija Izetbegović signed an agreement with the Yugoslav counterpart Slobodan Milošević to exchange ambassadors. Milošević was aware that such an exchange would constitute a de facto recognition of Bosnian statehood. Although he signed the agreement, Serbia delayed the actual exchange of ambassadors. In 2001, then Yugoslavia opened its embassy in Sarajevo, Bosnian capital, and appointed Milan Protic as its first ambassador to BH. 2 years later, Bosnia opened its embassy in Belgrade and sent Željko Janjetović as the first ambassador to its eastern neighbor. This delay reflected the Serbian leadership's reluctance to accept Bosnia as a fully sovereign and independent state that has persisted to this day. Meanwhile, Milošević lost power and stepped down on October 5th in 2000 after massive demonstrations. The democratic opposition took control in Belgrade, but however, this political shift did not significantly improve relations with Bosnia. The fact that Bosnia opened its embassy in Belgrade only 3 years after the fall of Milošević indicates a continuity in Serbia's political stance towards Bosnia. Internal Serbian politics were further shaken by the assassination of Prime Minister Zoran Đinđić in 2003, who was widely viewed as a democratic, reform-oriented, and a moderate leader. In 2012, Gingić's Democratic Party failed to form a coalition government and moved into opposition. The Serbian Progressive Party, founded by former members of the Serbian Radical Party, including Aleksandar Vučić and Tomislav Nikolić, came to power and has led the country ever since. This political shift significantly altered the regional balance, including Serbia's relations with Bosnia. The new government expressed a commitment to EU-oriented reforms, including improved relations with Bosnia. But these efforts were mostly symbolic, as Serbia's actions have shown continued alignment with the nationalist agenda of the former Radical Party. Serbia's leadership continues to promote the idea of protecting all Serbs in the region, regardless of their citizenship, claiming that Serbs in neighboring countries face injustice and discrimination. Serbia and Republika Srpska, one of the Bosnian entity, who organized the All Serbs Assembly in Belgrade in 2024. Serbs from across the region gathered and issued the All Serbs Declaration, calling for joint projects with Republika Srpska without any consent from the state institutions of Bosnia. This is in direct violation of the Bosnian constitution, which allows entity to maintain special relations with neighboring countries, but only with parliamentary approval. Although Serbia and Republika Srpska signed a cooperation agreement in 1996, it only came into effect 40 years later, deliberately circumventing Bosnian state institutions. Such behavior undermines Bosnian constitutional order, even as Serbian leaders publicly affirm their respect for the country's territorial integrity and sovereignty. 1 year after the All Serbs Assembly on February 26th, the president of Republika Srpska was sentenced to 1 year in prison and banned from political activity for 6 years. Although the verdict was not yet final, President Vučić visited him the same night, and during a press conference, Vučić described the ruling as an attack on Republika Srpska and the Serb people. He called on Dodik to launch a dialogue and demonstrate Serb commitment to peace, ironically, while simultaneously justifying unconstitutional behavior. The verdict in question concerned Dodik's defiance of decisions made by the High Representative, who is the final interpreter of the Bosnian constitution under the Dayton Peace Agreement. Beyond the assembly, the most sensitive issue between the two countries remain Srebrenica genocide. Paramilitary Serb forces executed a plan in eastern Bosnia, killing 8,372 Bosnian men and boys. Both the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia and the International Court of Justice recognized these atrocities as a genocide. Serbia was found guilty of failing to prevent the genocide. Despite these rulings, Serbia continues to deny the genocide and opposes the adoption of Srebrenica resolutions in UN bodies. The most recent resolution adopted by the UN General Assembly on May 23rd in 2024 called on member states to include the Srebrenica genocide in educational curricula and reaffirm support for the victims. Serbia's ambassador to the UN, Nemanja Stevanović, reacted angrily, claiming that he was not informed by Bosnian ambassador who had lobbied for the resolution independently. The Serbian Orthodox Church and other institutions lobbied intensely to prevent the resolution from reaching the UN agenda. When they failed, President Vučić traveled to New York and attended the session draped in the Serbian flag, claiming this was a response to accusations that all Serbs were responsible for the genocide. But in reality, no one had made such accusations except Vučić himself and his allies in Bosnia. There is also a strong evidence that the attack in 2015 on then Prime Minister Vučić during the Srebrenica memorial was orchestrated by Serbian intelligence. While it appeared that ordinary citizens were protesting and throwing objects, Serbian police sources later revealed that intelligence agents had infiltrated the crowd and coordinated the event. This incident was used to portray Vučić as a victim and peacemaker, despite his government's continued denial of genocide. The actions by Serbia and Republika Srpska align with the idea expressed in the Serbian Academy of Science and Arts Memorandum Second, a follow-up to the infamous 1986 Memorandum First, while the new memorandum avoids advocating for armed conflict. It continues to promote the destabilization of Bosnia and supports the secession of Republika Srpska. Thank you for your attention. I am open for discussion right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Very well on time. So, there would be two more presentation. One group of two people already notified. They are not here. The one missing is Elena Ono. Did she show up? I can't see her. So this means we finished with the presentation. It's time for question time. Who want to ask a question? Hands up. Speak. You can speak directly. Unmute and ask the question. Mark, okay?
Yes. So, Aslı Hanım, very interesting about the EU. So I had a few questions about that. How do you reconcile, for example, which I think everybody is perplexed about?
Oh, sorry. Please say. Okay. I was saying, if you have a specific question to a specific person, say it from the very beginning, who you want to address.
Yeah,
Okay.
Aslı Hanım, Aslı.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So Asli, a question for you, all right? Very, very interesting. How do you reconcile, which I find very hard, Turkey is a NATO power, seeking entry into an involvement with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the BRICS, and at the same time, as you say, seeking EU membership over many, many years. How do you reconcile this multitasking as even a realistic possibility? And also, I know you emphasize the civilizational aspect of this, but isn't it a fact that Turkey negotiates with and works with the customs union and the EU and made some deals with the Europeans on the Syrian refugees and so forth? So at the bottom line, to me, by the way, this is completely unfair to Turkey, and Turkey should be in the EU. But at the same time, it is multitasking in a way that I think the Europeans, not just for the civilizational reason, but are concerned where, and NATO powers are also concerned, where is Turkey's emphasis is in Avrupa and Europe or Asia? Where are you? Who are you? And what is your basic orientation? So I'd like to know how you see Turkey positioning itself. And by the way, you said the world is bigger than five. That's a really interesting point. How would you address that? Anyway, I'm sorry it's too many questions, Dr. Ploberger, but I found what you said very, very interesting and provocative. Thank you.
We have time.
Yes,
Please, Asli.
First of all, I just want to underline that my paper, my point of view is not in defense of Turkey entering in the European Union. I just tried to show Turkey's civilizationism with the EU, but my personal point of view is not in that sense. On the other hand, yes, Turkey first applied for Shanghai Organization in 2013, as far as I know. 2013. On the other hand, the BRICS comes later. As far as I know, I'm not a European, I'm not an expert on European Union law, but in any case, Turkey cannot be in two organizations at the same time. This is not possible legally. If Turkey is in the European Union, it must be in the European Union. If in Shanghai Organization, this is another thing. But there are those people in Turkey who defend, without much exploring the subject matter, who defend a multipolar foreign policy in the name of making advantage of this country's position between East and West. So they say that we have a unique position geostrategically, and we must take advantage of this position. This discourse is all the more supported as the European Union and Turkish relations got downgraded for many reasons. I believe, as you said, that the civilizational question is not the only reason. Because for me, what counts more than civilization, more than identity, is democracy, economy, infrastructure. So all these problems are Turkey's problems at the moment. In this state of affairs, I don't think it is possible for Turkey to even discuss its membership with the EU. And so, because Turkey is discouraged from the West, let's say the EU, it tries to look for alternatives. Shanghai Organization is a good alternative. BRICS is a good alternative. But the question is, will they accept Turkey? As far as I know, they didn't accept Turkey's membership in Shanghai Organization, and not in BRICS either. In this case, I believe, and these organizations, on the other hand, for me, are not alternatives to the European Union either. They see it, some strategists see it as alternatives, but they are not alternatives because there is no normative aspect in these organizations. We need this country to democratize, to get better and have better record in human rights, women's situation, all the disadvantages people should get better. And these organizations are not the answer to these questions. So for me, they are not an alternative, but for many strategists in Turkey, they seem to be an alternative just because of this idea of taking advantage of Turkey's unique position between East and West. And because of the discouragement regarding the question of Turkish-European Union relations. So who are we? We are a bit everything like Russia's discourse. We are East, we are West, everything. For me, it's like that. But as I said, nowadays, Turkey defines itself within an Ottoman Islamic narrative, which is Eastern oriented. My discourse maybe does not represent everybody in this country because of the neo-Ottomanism that this country leads now for a certain time, at least for more than a decade. I don't know if I could answer.
I also asked you about the world is bigger than five. What did you think about that? I know that's a big part of Turkey's argument about the way the United Nations is structured. Shouldn't we have a reset of the entire UN institutional system? I mean, how does Turkey, and what is your view on that? I mean, again, how do you as an analyst look at the pluses and minuses of that idea and whether that's even feasible in the world, the way we're structured? What do you think?
Yes, UN Security Council is just a reflection of the power structure available after the Second World War. So it's not a fair composition. I completely agree with the idea that the world is bigger than five, but I don't know how we should think about a restoration of that system because not only Turkey, everybody wants to be in the council. India wants it, Venezuela wants it, Brazil wants it. I mean, not only us. So how it's going to be? We must think of a very maybe technical solution to that. But on the other hand, the power structure, the current global power structure remains as it is. Even if we have a technical solution, how shall we convince the big powers, the great powers of the world? It's just, for me, it's just a discourse. Although I agree with the idea.
I wanted to add one last point, if I may, Dr. Ploberger, in terms of the world is bigger than five, and that is with the veto, Aslı Hanım, with the veto in place, the UN Security Council is dysfunctional. It doesn't function. I've been
Yes.
listening. I put my ear out. I live in New York. I've been waiting. When are we going to talk about the war in Ukraine and the Russian atrocities against the Ukrainian people? I haven't heard that because the Russians have a veto and the U.S. uses veto. So basically, it's just a debating, not even a debating society. Even some of the things that are debated there would not be appropriate for a debating society. It's so utterly ridiculous to have the Iranian representatives sit there and say, we are a peaceful nation and we want to have peaceful power. I mean, how does he do it? How does he look in the mirror? So I honestly, anybody could say whatever they want, even if it's totally ridiculous and absurd. And then the great powers sit there, and and then they just veto everything. So that's just my thought. But I think your points are very, very interesting and provocative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I would like to intervene. Also, make two comments and one question. I mean, I'm Austrian, as I said before. My government had a very strict position on the Turkey membership. I have a different opinion than some of my people I know, because when Chancellor Kohl 30, 40 years ago, I think 30 years ago, first time came up with the argument the EU is a Christian union, I thought I was mistaken. Neither I nor every person I know voted for a membership of the European Union based off a Christian culture. The people voted for or against it to get consumer goods cheaper.
Yes.
So any civilization aspect came up afterwards was trumped up by some politician within the European Union, basically to make it hard or impossible for Turkey to join. Of course, on the other hand, Turkey would have to implement some democratic rules which still failed of doing so. But the civilization aspect that the European Union is a Christian union I'm sorry to say an academic discourse, but it's a nonsense. And now nobody who voted for joining the European Union in Austria, because I got asking around, because they say for traveling, for make it easier, for make it the trade-off in cheaper products, shaking the head. I'm a Christian myself, but it was never came up to my mind. So in this way, there needs to be a defense for Turkey, because Turkey was offered the opportunity very long time ago, and then it was laid out in the rain. So then, if Turkey then starts to look somewhere else, it should nobody wondering. The second comment is to you, Mark, when you complain about Ukraine,
Can't hear you.
then I would
Can't
also
hear-
say, what's about the Palestinian case? Wait a moment.
I couldn't
If
hear
you say
you. It's broke.
nobody, can you hear me?
Yeah, but
Can you
repeat
hear
it
me
because
now?
it was breaking up.
Yeah,
Just say
yeah,
it.
okay. I say, yeah. If you complain about the Ukraine case, the people are quiet. What's about the ongoing situation in Gaza? The whole
I didn't hear the last thing you said. Did Dr. P freeze? Are you there, Dr. Ploberger? I think he froze.
Yeah. The connection has failed.
Yes.
Yeah, well, maybe
He's
it'll
frozen.
come back. Maybe it'll come back. Maybe it'll come back. Maybe it'll come back. Right? Inshallah, right, Asli? So maybe we could just keep talking among ourselves until he comes back. But I think, oh yeah. He's back now, I think.
apologize. My connection was disconnected. No idea why.
Repeat the line. Yeah, repeat again. Yeah, we lost you.
I'm
Go
very
ahead.
sorry. No, my second point was, if you complain about Ukraine, that there's
Yes.
not much worse, then I would counter argue, what's about Palestinian? What's about happened now in Palestine? Because almost everyone would vote for a stop, but it's America who votes against it. So this power politics in the Security Council happened since the United Nations exists. It was also during the Cold War, so it's nothing new. Even during the Cold War, it even was more regular. I mean, the intervention in the Korean War, as a United Nations intervention happened by accidents because the Soviet Union
That's right.
abstained. But otherwise, it
They
was
didn't.
there's nothing new in that. However, that's my comment. But I have a question on you because considering that the PKK, so the Kurdish, I don't know the English name, so the
PKK, yes, PKK.
as an organization agreed
Yeah.
for a peace deal with the Turkish government. Does it mean, in your opinion, that the Kurdish fighter in northern Syria will now experience less pressure from the Turkish military because they can not longer be said you are allied with this terrorist group? What is your opinion on it?
Well, let's say, okay,
Because
I'll
basically
take
the Syrian, the Kurdish, the Syrian, they always said we are not connected. Now the PKK resolve itself. So what is your opinion how the Turkish government or military will change its position to the Kurdish fighter in Syria? So not the PKK, but
yeah,
the Kurdish
I
fighter in
understand.
Syria. Do you think the issue will be solved? Okay, that's my question.
Well, let me do your question, and then I want to react to your comment because
That's
it's
my
really big,
question on you.
powerful comment. Okay, so the point is on the PKK and the peace process. First of all, there is no final peace process yet in terms of the PKK putting down its arms, and we really don't know. And I can say with some, I think, fair confidence, but this is really based on my professor mentor, who I won't mention in Turkey, who has taught me most everything I know and many things I know. The people in Turkey have been existentially threatened by the PKK. There have been thousands killed. There is not a moment where you snap your finger and have a peace process with the PKK. So we don't know the result of it. There's also Kurdish representatives in the parliament, the DEM party, lots of moving parts. Now to Syria, let's just go to that because that's your question. The YPG, PYD, those groups that are in Syria, the Syrian regime under al-Shara has requested, mandated, that all fighters in all groups must put down their arms and join the military and become one Syrian military. General Mazloum Abdi has said, no, we are not. We are going to stay we'll make a connection to the Syrian military, but we will remain a cohesive group because we don't want to break it up. We're afraid that the regime is going to persecute us. Point one. Point number two, and this is very important. Yes, they are connected. The Turks take the position that the Syrian Kurds are PKK, and PKK is the Syrian Kurds. The United States doesn't agree with that, and CENTCOM works with the Syrian Kurds and the Syrian Kurdish forces and Hassan and fought ISIS together. So I'll add that to the list of problems in making this go away. And the Turkish position, again, as I understand it from those I have heard it from, is that, look, Turkey will come in and we will work and we will take over the ISIS prisons. We will undertake to do all that. You don't need, the Kurds can become integrated into the regime, but that is more likely when we know when it's going to happen. When it didn't happen, it's going to be very complicated because of the confidence. Now, that also relates to Turkey's position and status in Syria, which is not settled. They have an infrastructure regime. They have troops there. They want a defense agreement with Syria. And of course, the whole deconfliction with Israel. Israel bombed the T4 base. So I would say that in thinking, there's a lot of moving parts that have to be resolved before we can get to the point to figure this out. By the way, the Turkish position, which I don't think is so far flung, is that, Syrian Kurds are Marxists. They're different ideology. They're not like the Kurds in Kurdistan. They're not the same as the Iranian Kurds. They're not even the same as the millions of Kurds in Turkey. Yeah. So there's a lot of things. Now, let me go to your point about your interesting comment, which I thought was really interesting. Look, the problem I agree with you. The same problem exists on Gaza as with Ukraine. I agree. Sure. When I look at the Security Council, when they come up with an issue, the U.S. vetoes on Gaza, then Russia will veto on Ukraine. And the Korean War, as you say, was an anomaly because, the Russians had stepped out. They didn't pay their financial due. And then suddenly they voted. And suddenly we had not only UN, we had the UN under a U.S. commander going with troops and fighting Chinese and Koreans in Korea. I mean, by the way, the Korean War has never ended. So, is that our paradigm for how we want to solve things? At the same time, we don't have ongoing conflict, and hopefully we won't. Now, here is my point. I do think, however, that what we need is a reset in the international institutions, because these institutions do not function properly. Now, again, when I say properly, that's my opinion, of course. You might say, Dr. Ploberger or Oksana or Harun or anyone else, I think it's doing fine. They're trying very hard. But to me, when I listen to the UN, I think they are completely fixated on issues. And there are a lot of issues out there that they don't take up, and they should take up. And the reason they don't take them up is because of political reasons that are far from the idea of the UN Charter, which is meant to get peace and security in the world. In other words, what I'm saying is that I think we should take up all the issues. Now, to the point that you made about the Cold War, look, the reality is the UN was created after World War II by the powers at the time. Maybe it's an anachronism, but that was done in a way so that they would join. Soviet Union would never have joined. Nobody, and China was, of course, nationalist China. Nobody would have joined if there wouldn't be the fuse box of the veto. They wouldn't have joined because they would have said, the first thing you're going to do is make an action against us, right? And that is the one thing you cannot do in the UN. Does that work? Well, it's a political reality. So your comment is so well taken, and it is correct what you said about how it functions, but its dysfunctionality. What Erdogan is suggesting is a very valid point. I think the world is bigger than five, but the question is, Aslı says, which five? Who is more than five? Does that mean Turkey should be in the Security Council? Well, then what about, wait a minute, then there are a lot of other powers that are emerging that want to be in the Security Council. How about a Latin American country?
Yeah.
How about a regional representation? So I think at the end of the day, somebody think about it. That's what I think.
There's no question. The issue of expanding the five, you're very good point. Which country? Who is representing who? We have in Asia a number of countries, in South America, in Africa. So there's no question about that. However, we have to be careful for not taking all the time if somebody else wants to ask some questions. So I stop our discourse now because I'm sure we could get on for longer. Anyone else have any question or comments? Please come forward.
I want to ask a question to Mark Meirowitz. Okay. Turkish opposition at the moment is living hard times. I'm sure you follow. The mayor is in the prison and everything. But I don't see any reaction from the Western powers to what's going on here in this country. I know Trump gets along well with our president. At least I think that way. But there's no reaction to other issues going on in the country neither from Trump, neither from European leaders. What do you think about this?
Well, first of all, I think that it ties into your excellent presentation on EU. I mean, the European Parliament is all over the place on this, and the European human rights councils and courts are all about this. And I think I just looked it up. I can't profess to be AI, but I looked it up, and it was, the European Parliament voted on that. They are very concerned about the things that you talked about, and that I think has hindered some of the accession of Turkey to the EU. I mean, sure. I mean, when you say, are they concerned? Well, I want to talk about Trump. You'll give me a minute. Trump does not talk about internal affairs in other countries.
Yes.
I mean, he deals with Putin and, the way, and again, I don't want to say whether I like Trump, I know who I voted for, whatever. I think some of his foreign policy is just very effective. But, when he talks about Putin, he doesn't focus on this. And when he talks about President Erdogan is a great guy and al-Shara is a fighter and these guys are great and I really like him and I like this one, I don't like that one, you don't really hear a lot from President Trump about internal politics of the type that you're talking about. I mean, I don't think it's not a priority in American, it just is not a priority. Not Carter. Carter was, his whole thing was human rights. All he focused on was human rights. I mean, is that a good thing? Yes, from a moral point of view. But Carter, in my humble opinion, is one of the worst presidents we've had. He had us humbled and almost destroyed with the Iranian hostage crisis, which the Iranians maneuvered to release the hostages on the day that Reagan was inaugurated. I mean, what a humiliation of the United States. So to my point, I think you have a point, but human rights policy, I'm sorry to say, should be a bigger priority in the world, but it isn't. It just
Okay,
isn't.
so,
Not just about Turkey, it's about everything.
Sure.
It's about everything. Yeah, please, I'm sorry.
Thank you. It was a confirmation for me. Thanks. I don't have a question anymore.
Do we have another minute or two, Dr. Ploberger?
Anyone else?
Do we have another minute or two?
I mean, we have 3 minutes. 3 minutes. We have 3 minutes left.
So I
So
have
if
a
any
question.
more questions, you're welcome.
Yeah. Oksana, now, how did you get involved in this research area, which was really interesting? And I think it's fascinating because we really don't talk, it's about the art, and nobody talks about it, but it's really, really important today. How did you get involved in that, and why did you become interested?
Well, actually, I started with my first project on the Gulag, and I was researching the Russian state, and then I just realized that to understand what was going on in Russia, in the Soviet Union, you cannot do it isolatedly. You need to look it through the interaction, like how the Russia cannot exist. The Russia has been looking for an autarky, but it's constantly shaped by the external events, and the key answer to all that is borders. So everything that is happening in Russia today has been shaped by this perception of the vulnerability of its borders that stems back to the Russian Empire of the 19th century. In fact, Stalin doesn't say anything new in theory, and although it's like in the Gerasimov doctrine and everything that we are witnessing today, there is nothing new. Everything has been said by the Russian bureaucrats in the Russian Empire. And that's how I came to the issue of the borders. And after the Russian aggression on Ukraine, I had to cross many borders myself.
Wow.
So my personal experience of an immigration, which was dramatic, and the loss of my home, they made me meet a lot of people who experienced their own immigration in many distinct ways. And this in my recent article, which has been published in the Big Review, I try to address some of these issues. And finally, the final issue was that they realized that the borders have this transformatory nature on human beings, on people. The borders transform people, and the borders transform the state. And finally, in the Russian case, we have these long-term alliances, for example, these corruption networks, anti-corruption campaigns directed at the border control. They also have their historical predecessors. The Stalin's policy made a break, but in a strange way, all those shady alliances emerged yet again. So the cyclicity of the Russian borders is the issue which interests me most.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we reached the end of the line. Yes. Once again, very welcome to listen to your presentation and to the engagement in the discussion. I'm sure we could go on, but we reached the time limit. So once again, nice meeting you. If you want to take a picture, do it now before you're off. Good. Everyone took his picture. Then I say goodbye.
Thank you
See you
very
next
much.
time on
Thank you.
another conference.